And that's when this general guy says, it was the war and we discovered a life form. And then he says the key thing. He says, we'll help you, but don't be disappointed. He says, what you may find when you get to the end is a bunch of guys standing around in suits in the dark around an elephant.
Where do you think this is ultimately leading? Like, what's the point of all
nature
this
reality?
demonstration?
To me, it's the nature of reality. It's understanding that the world is way more complex. It's going to be way less physical than you think. It's going to be 1,000 times more complex than you think. And it's probably going to be a spiritual end to this whole thing. It's going to be this idea that everything is an activity inside consciousness. What's actually going on? Like, where do we come from? Where are we going? People say, don't worry about that. We got a business to do here. And that was always my thing, is this whole idea of trying to figure out, like, what am I doing here? Why did I see this UFO? What is this UFO? What's really going on? I was sort of raised to be a minister. So I always had that thing in the back of my mind. And I had done stuff with near-death experience, or not even near-death experience, with dead people when I was at university. I did a whole term paper, which was almost a book, which was looking at people in hospitals, all these weird things in hospitals. And this was when the first near-death experience book came out in 1975. So I was looking at things like, I was talking to the chaplains. I say, does anybody ever get up and walk out of here? Like, do you think they're dead and they get up and walk out? And miracles? You ever get any miracles? And they go, yeah, I got a few of those, but they always come back. They go for a little while, but they come back. And I say, anybody ever have anybody come to greet them? Dead people coming to help them over? And they go, oh yeah, we got that. And I say, anybody ever predict their death? You ever get anybody predict their death, that they're going to die? And you go, yeah. And they tell me this story about some guy that, said, I'm going to die today. And they said, no, you're doing good today. No, I'm going to die. Get my wife. I'm going to die today. And they get his wife, and an hour later he's dead, and stuff like this. So I was always interested in this sort of stuff. But that's what I think. I think the closest person to understanding this is Deepak Chopra. Deepak Chopra talks about this idea that everything is an activity inside consciousness. And the prime example is this idea of the out-of-body experience, that when you have the out-of-body experience and you look back at yourself, you say, is consciousness in the brain? And you go, no, it ain't. I'm here. The consciousness is here. My body's down there, which means the body is inside the consciousness. And then you go and look out the window and you see the stars and the planets and whatever, and you realize that's in your consciousness too, which is exactly what Wheeler said. John Wheeler, who was supposedly the intellectual successor to Einstein at Princeton, he said there's no out there. It's a participatory universe. And this idea that it's, whatever you want to call it, a computer world or virtual reality, Matrix, it's all, as John Wheeler says, I can be 100% go along with the idea that the entire universe is a figment of the imagination. And that goes to Chandler's. Seth, the first Chandler, Seth said, you manifest everything around you. There is no other rule. And that's where we're going to be going, but nobody wants to go there. Because that is like, can you imagine the government coming out and saying, well, no, we discovered that it's all in a figment of imagination. The economy would just collapse. It would just, anybody who knows it, they're just going to use it to their benefit. So they've known right from the word go, like with remote viewers. They've known the right brain, left brain thing with remote viewers, that they pick up with the right brain. They pick up the size, the shape, the taste, the color, the smell, whatever. And that, as Hal Puthoff's wife discovered with the remote viewing, is that when they went to name the subject, they always got it wrong. It's a swimming pool when it was a sewage treatment plant, and they would always get it wrong. And then they learned about the analytical overlay. So I asked Hal Puthoff, when I discovered the right brain, left brain thing, this whole idea that one is in tap with the universe and the other one is this sort of in the physical world. Then I said, did you discover this with remote viewing? And he said, read my book. This is chapter 6. And that's all he said. Read my book, chapter 6. And I go to his Mind Reach book, and here it is. It's called In One Brain and Out the Other. So already in 1972, they knew this idea about the idea that people could bilocate. That goes to the idea that the remote viewing, you may not be going anywhere. Same as out-of-body experience will say, you're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere, but you're going in. So the remote viewing is the idea that everything is the aliens on board the ship. When they say, where do you want to go? It's within you. Go within yourself, Sean. It's within you. When you get there, when you can imagine it, push the button. And that's the thing, is where's the remote viewers going? It's all within yourself. It's all there. So you go. So telepathy, you're not going into someone's mind. You're going into the field. All the stuff is in the field. 31% near-death experiences, 40% of experiencers say they knew the answer to everything yours. everything is within us. It's this idea there may be just one point. It's all within us. And what you do in the target is like when a person's going to the target, say it's in Russia or whatever, they don't say, hang on, I'm flying to the target. I'll be there in a minute. It's like, I'm at the target. They're there instantly. They go within themselves. And what is, like Joe McMoneagle, what does Joe McMoneagle say? What's the key to it? He says, got to clear your mind, shut down the voice in your head. So the signal is there. It's the left brain that's just chattering away. I know everything. It's the Twitter book club where nobody's read a book. I know everything. Ask me about anything. I can tell you about anything. And in this world, you can go there, and the people who have the experience will say exactly what I did. When I say to people, I'd say to people who claim that they knew everything in the universe, UFO people, I'd say, so how do you know that? How do you know that for sure? How do you know there was number 6, 7, 8 on the 5 side of the universe they forgot to tell you about? And they say exactly what I would say about my experience in 2012 and the one I had in 2016. They say, I'm not sure. I just know. And it's that knowing. I know that was the answer that came to me. And you see this over and over. I wrote a book called Inspired, where I look at inventions. And people will say, the two of them, the laser and the hologram, are both invented by guys sitting on park benches. They worked on the problem. They couldn't figure it out. And then they're sitting on the park bench and boom, it comes. And they go running back to the lab and write it down. And it comes to them. They know this is the answer. Or Gary Nolan. I asked Gary Nolan, I said, Gary, give me the quote I can use. Gary Nolan says, because he works with these experiencers, and Gary Nolan's an experiencer. And he said, at one point, he said, I don't know how it works, but I know how to make it work. And he tells this experience where he works through the problem and he goes through all the questions and stuff, writes all this down. And then he writes down the question and puts it beside the bed. And he said, either the next morning or the next couple of days, the idea is in his head. So I said, Gary, give me a quote I can use to describe how this works. And this is the whole idea. This idea of intuition, that everything is in the field, that you can pop into the field. So that's what happens with these people with Tesla. Tesla's walking through a park in Budapest, and he's saying, all of a sudden, boom, the idea of the alternating motor comes into his head, and he draws it in the sand for the guy that's walking with him. It's in the field. And Tesla would say, I go in the field and I test it, and I don't bring it out until I've tested it in the field. He goes in the field and all that material is there. And if that's true, that's the reality, that it's all this sort of ooly mind stuff, and that we're believing this perceived reality that we're physical beings and that we're having this sort of experience, and there's separation between you and me. And then you have an ayahuasca experience like the magician Sting, and you suddenly go, oh my God, I realized everything was alive, everything was conscious, and everything was connected. And I looked at the ground, and there was this little plant coming out of the ground, this little flower, and I said, oh, that's my brother. And that's the mystical literature. That's near-death experience. That's UFO people talk about. That's what psychedelic people talk about. The fact that everything's connected, everything's one, which isn't perceived reality. It's completely different than perceived reality. Your perceived reality is this me versus you. So you can get into weapons. You're the bad guy. I'm a Canadian. You got you Americans. You're all like full of it, man. You're just like all troublemakers and stuff like that. And then you say, we're the bad guys. We're a national security threat. And that's the thing. It's this separation. And so what they're doing with the disclosure thing now is you're doing more separation, weapons of mass destruction. We've got to create an enemy, and let's get this enemy, and let's bring out the stuff. Don't mention the fact that the nuclear weapon stuff is 50 years old, that we're talking about Malmstrom is 1967. That's a long time ago. That hasn't happened for years, and all this kind of stuff, that we've got to build that thing. And then when you start to live in daylights at it, then you're going to get some money. As long as there's no money, they're going to say, don't let the door hit you on the way out, man. Just get out of here. We're not interested in this. Why would we be interested in it? And so that's, I think, what's happening is the left brain is this idea of fear and blame and making money. And that's the way the world works. That you got to pay your bills, and we'll worry about the spiritual stuff later or whatever. And I've just done it for so long that it's led me there. And I actually can say that I've had the synchronicities, that every book, there's a bizarre, wild story of a synchronicity that leads me to know what I'm going to do next and work on this, work on that. And to me, it's like living in the Super Bowl. But the bottom line is, it's nature of reality. Nobody thinks about nature of reality. They're worried about taking the kid to soccer practice and paying the bills and stuff like that. And the nature of reality is what they're trying to get us, is because once you realize that and you realize everything's connected, then you're going to stop doing all this kind of stuff. Or the nuclear weapons, the thing where you rip time space when you detonate nuclear weapons, that if everything's one, then when we hit the bell in 1945, detonating the atomic bomb, the bell rang and everybody in the universe all came because it's all connected. Everybody knew. And you have this rip in time and space, and they go, oh, there's a bunch of assholes here. Let's go and tune them in here and try to move them around. And in the end, it doesn't really matter whether we destroy the world, we may destroy the world. It doesn't really matter. If it's a reincarnation world, which it probably is, It's like the old story. You're going to keep running that play till you get it right. You're going to be on a different place. You come back someplace else. You don't necessarily have to come back here, but you're just going to keep doing it. And it's all this thing of experience and learning, and the world gets more smart. And it's a closed loop where we're feeding material in, and it gets smarter and smarter and more complex and more complex. And that's the way I see the world. And I've moved a long way away from UFOs, but I can sort of relate to people because, I mean, if I hadn't had a UFO sighting, I'd be just stupid as everybody else. I would not. And that's the whole deal. It's because I had a UFO sighting. That's what led me down this path. If I hadn't had the consciousness experience in 2012, I wouldn't have been into consciousness. As I told Jerry Pippin, Jerry, I didn't go there. I kind of teleported there. I was like, there was no choice. It was like, boom, I was there. And it was like, I suddenly understood this. And that's where people are at, whatever level they're at. And so if Chris Bledsoe's right, that we all come here, and a lot of the experiencers say this, that they came in to do something, that if reincarnation is a fact, then you and I came into the world to do something, who knows what it is, and that when we leave, they're only going to ask you one question, according to Michael Newton's 7,000 people, and that's how did it work out? Sean, you planned it. And you can't say, Hillary Clinton, the dog ate my homework, my mother-in-law, whatever. They're going to go, time out, this is not about them, it's about you. How did it work out? You planned it, and everybody says the same thing. I could have done better. And so it's this whole idea, why did we come into the world? We're going to get asked how did it work out, and what are we supposed to be doing, and are we doing it? That's all we got to worry about. We don't have to worry about anybody else. And so you look at the events that happen to you and see how they relate, and do what you can. And there may be plans. People talk all the time about these plans, that you and I had a meeting before we were born. And you said, I'm going to do this podcast. You can come on the podcast. Yeah, I'll come on your podcast. And I'm going to do this. And it may be all this sort of stuff. That's the way the world starts to look. It starts to look like these ideas, these synchronicities, how the synchronicities all work together, that you think it's a synchronicity and actually it was a plan. And it's like, I forgot it. And that's what the whole idea, that when you get people in the field, it's almost like they show you something and you go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And suddenly that's that knowing thing. So it's not something that convinced you. They showed you something that you already knew and you go, oh yeah, I forgot. And that's, oh, I know, because I've seen it before. So that's basically where I'm at. I'm moving away from the nuts and bolts where I was before, and people are getting very upset, especially with this apportation thing with the physical mediums. But when you get some guy who can apport 2,000 objects, and you can stand there with a camera and you can run whatever controls you want, tie strap the guy in, put water in his mouth, make him spit the water out at the end and make sure it's at the same level in the glass, and get him to eat a pizza, and then get him to eat watermelon with big seeds in it just before he starts to throw these things up. And people talking about this little flying saucer comes in above this bowl, and these things are falling into the bowl. And that just fascinates me when I go, and it's like they're showing off, because they used to be, the physical mediums used to make a couple of things appear. Then my assistant Desta went, and she got healed. She had an injury from the time she was a little kid. She got thrown out of a Jeep, was moving her boyfriend, and it landed on her backside and injured her back and her tailbone. She's never been on a day without pain. She went, and his hands came and out of the cabinet and touched her, and she was healed and stuff like that. And then there was 1,800 apports. And then suddenly, for another friend of mine gets healed, I hear another one a couple of weeks later. I'm going, is this coincidence, or am I supposed to follow this? And then she gets healed, and she tells me the whole story. And I start interviewing the people in there, and there's over 2,000. And it's almost like the phenomena showing off. It's like, okay, we're going to do 2,000. And you start to see these things, and they're coming out of they're flying into people's hair and stuff like this, these things. And then they're falling into this bowl. And they're coming out of the guy's mouth. And some people can make them come out of their eyes. And if you see, a piece of dust in your eye, and this guy's got these things and they're filming and they're coming out of his eyes. That's just the theory of, wow, that's like, watch this, man. The phenomenon is just going, watch this. Figure this one out. And it's always impossible. And you go like, that's impossible. There's no way. The guy's got to be hoaxing. It's got to be. And what it is no, they're showing you these impossible things behind the scenes and get you curious and get you moving down, because this thing is picking up speed. And this guy's allowed us to interview him. And my assistant Desta is going to be trained. And then there's no problem about the fraud, because if Desta's doing this, she ain't faking it. She's taking all these courses, reading all these books. And I said, Desta, this whole idea that there's a portal. And that's the whole thing behind where the UFOs coming. They're coming out of portals. And I wrote a book on portals from Mount Shasta. And I have the Ron Pandolfi thing, where Ron Pandolfi, this head guy from the CIA, says, people have always wondered what it's like to go into the next world. And I get this on tape, and he's furious. That Cameron's a thief. And it's like, well, you put it on your channel. I mean, how would I leave that off? I grabbed it. People have wondered what it's like to go into the next world. The next time John, his buddy sitting beside him, goes to the desert, and they've got this rumor of the portal in the desert. Next time he goes to the desert, a number of us here will go into the next world and come back again. And that's not nuts and bolts. That's this idea that the intelligence, I would say that if the government has something, they understand the time travel thing. This whole idea about people jumping time travel stuff, that may be true, because it appears every time I go down that route, there's some evidence. Every time I go down the nuts and bolts thing, it always crashes and burns. But every time I go down that portal thing, and I did the thing with the portals in Mount Shasta, and I interviewed the people who were in those portals, and I said, what do you see? And what do you see? And they're all describing the same thing. And then we had the one in 2020 in Shasta, hundreds of beings, 9 witnesses. I got 3 of them on camera, 9 witnesses levitated into the air. It's almost like the phenomena saying, hey, write this one up. And it's like, and I just can't believe it. And I actually went to the CIA, and I went to one of the guys connected to Pandolfi, and I said, okay, I got these 9 people who were levitated, and they sounded like they're underwater, which means they're inside a portal. Can you tell me what the CIA knows about portals? I think it's time you guys open up. He said, okay, you do a thing with these people, Hollywood, I'll set it up. We do a show, you tell the story, and I'll give you the story what the CIA knows about portals. And then, of course, the translator who knew Pandolfi went to these people and said, that's the CIA, Grant's bringing the CIA, don't get it. They all just scattered, all the witnesses are gone. But that you talk about that, and that got no traction. 9 witnesses on Mount Shasta, on the sand flats, levitated into the air, and hundreds of beings coming. And they were etheric beings. They were the same thing. They weren't physical beings. They were etheric beings. Or you get the ones with the earlier portals, 1450. Military guy, 24 years. He was in the second portal, 2015. He wasn't there in 2014. 2015, he's translating for Paula Harris, because it's all Latinos. So everybody speaks Spanish. So here's his interpreter, and he wasn't supposed to be in the portal. He wasn't supposed to be in the Zender. He was supposed to have 7 people in there. So he goes in there as the translator. And the second one, it was a hologram. The same being as 2014 with the smaller beings, but they're all 10 feet tall. And it was a hologram. You could see the trees through it. So I says to this guy, I said, hey, you saw Antarell? He said, yeah, I saw Antarell. And I said, you saw him as a hologram? He said, no, it wasn't a hologram. I said, yeah, everybody said it was a hologram. Look, he said, I was close enough. I could see the lines in his face. That was not a hologram. He was as real could be. And he was like right up. And this guy had never seen anything. And then he goes home, and the being follows him home. He's appearing in birthday parties. The cars, the wipers are going, and the car's turned off, and the windshield wipers, the car. And his wife says, your Martian friends are playing with the car again. He said, they're not Martians. He said, they're playing with your car. And they were doing the same Skinwalker. It was the same thing as Skinwalker, the hitchhiker. He took this thing home. He never had a sighting. And this thing took him home, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't the evil type stuff. And that's where George Knapp said, or Brandon Fugel said, it's reflective. Be careful what you think when you go to Skinwalker Ranch, because this thing is reflective of what you. So if you have bad intentions, it's going to reflect what you're doing. And that's what happened here. Is he had this phenomena, this thing keep appearing, and he's the guy that set up the 2021. That was him that set it up. This other being came to him and said, we want to come, we're going to appear. But it was COVID, and they were up on the mountain, and that's when these hundreds of beings appeared with these 9 people. So you see this pattern, but it's all angelic. So I always say, if you think there's rays and reptilians and evil aliens, go to the Mission Rama. There's 25,000 of these people around the world, and they open portals. They talk to aliens all the time. They have these program sightings. They did twice in front of me. I wrote 2 books about them, about my 2 weekends with these people. I wrote 2 books. It's just bizarre stuff that these people can do, these leaders. And if you look at that, I say, I defy you to find a gray or a reptilian or a mantis. They look like Michael Phelps. They're all muscular. They got long hair, which I always make the joke. I said, why do bad aliens have no hair? And why do good aliens always have long hair, and they're all beautiful, and the women all fall in love with them and stuff like that? And it's this, the thing is, John Wheeler says, it's a participatory universe. You're part of what you're seeing. And that's what Kit Green says. Kit Green is the guy that if you're a general in the Pentagon and you have a being in your room, they send you to Kit Green. That's his job. He's been doing it for years. He's the guy that you say, is the guy crazy? Have the Russians got this guy? Are they brainwashing him? Or is he engaging? And it's Kit Green that went on the record and said, the being that you see is influenced by your belief system, and that people in the same event can see 2 different beings. He's on the record as saying that. And that's this whole idea that it's very fluid. These things can change. Or even I don't know if you were around at the time, but Sparks was the first guy. Bud Hopkins was dealing with him, and so was John Mack. Jim Sparks. And Jim Sparks was the guy who came up with the screen imaging idea. that these aliens are able to screen image. And he tells the one story. He says the being appears to him as a military guy. And he's going, bullshit. You're screen imaging. You're not fooling me. You're just screen imaging. In fact, he said, you got the wrong uniform on. And he said, like that, the uniform changed to the right uniform. Instantly, he said, you got the wrong uniform on. The uniform changed to the right uniform. And you see that kind of stuff. Jim Semivan said, they're running the show. And Jim Semivan is the one that where I go, where you see more and more high-level officials talking about. Jim Semivan says, they say, we just got to connect the dots. I'm not sure there's any dots to connect. Or he says, there does not appear to be any there. That does not appear to be sound like physical ETs, and very simple. They're just in flying saucers and on a roundabout, took the wrong turn on a roundabout out there and a couple light years away and ended up on Earth. Or I mentioned before the one with Tom DeLonge. I watch these guys very carefully. So if somebody's in contact with a high-level official, I listen very carefully to what they're saying, what the high-level official says. So Tom DeLonge is talking about he gets invited to Lockheed Skunk Works, which is not a coincidence. We want to introduce the president of Lockheed Skunk Works, and he's into UFOs and stuff. Oh, I'd love to do that. And they suck him in, reel him in. And then he's like, I want to talk to Robert Weiss, the director, and he ends up in a Lockheed skiff at Area 51. And then they send it to NASA. And then he ends up with this general at the airport. There's this meeting. And that's when this general guy says, it was the war, and we discovered a life form. And then he says the key thing. He says, we'll help you, but don't be disappointed. He says, what you may find when you get to the end is a bunch of guys standing around in suits in the dark around an elephant. And that is key, is that the thing. We figured they'd know what's going on. Yeah, they know some stuff. They know there's films. They got a lot of films. They got a lot of evidence. They may have bodies. They may have crafts. But in terms of figuring out what's going on, I think it's the same as reality. It's the more they look at it, the weirder it looks. And Eric Davis, who is probably one of the most outspoken guys, not so much anymore, but he's the guy that said they put it on the shelf in 1989 because they could not figure it out. Or the Wilson leak document where it says, we got a craft and we think it'll fly. And as soon as I heard that, I said, oh, that story about the craft, the intact craft, and they can't turn it on because they haven't got a consciousness interface. So they've got this craft and they can't turn the damn thing on because they don't understand how it works. It's way more complex. If it was an engine, we would have pulled the engine a long time ago and we would have figured this out. And if we got the technology, why did we do so bad against the Afghan guys? Why did we do so bad in Somalia? Why are we having so much trouble against these 1950, 1960 tanks in the Ukraine? I think a lot of it is bluster. We got this. We got it under control. We won the Vietnam War. Don't worry about it. And we got these new enemies, and it's to build the defense budget up, and it gets bigger and bigger and more enemies. And it's that spiral of who's got the money. You were trying to get funding. I remember John Rayo used to run the UFO Congress. I was at his facility and he had bought all sorts of collections, almost like Bigelow. And he said to me, Grant, I got a question for you. He said, how the hell do you make any money at this stuff? He's a multimillionaire. He said, how do you make any money at this stuff? I said, I don't know. I don't think anybody does. And he quit. He Open Minds magazine, he got rid of it. He got rid of the conference because they couldn't make any money at the thing. And that's the whole deal, is nobody makes any money at the thing. So who's got the money? Congress has got the money. The appropriations committee, all these guys, the weapons. So you go there and you get this story and you say, it's a threat and we got to deal with it. And even John Alexander said they tried it in the 1980s as well. They'd used the threat argument because they realized that unless it's a threat, why would the Defense Department? The Defense Department's been saying, every agency, it's not a threat to national security. NASA said that, the White House said that, the Blue Book said that, the Canadians said that back in the 50s. And it's like, you got to change that scenario that it is a threat to national security. And then it's like, how much money do you need? And then when you get that, then you up the thing and you bring in some more witnesses and you get some more money and you get that. And it's like the final thing, and then you can ask a question. Eisenhower said this. He made the famous speech, the final speech. Now, when I was looking at the files at the Eisenhower Library, there was never anything because there's no files at the presidential library. So I'm there and I'm going to finish the files in a couple of hours. And then I've got to find stuff to do. So I'm looking at all these oral histories. And so I figured I'll look, they all have them indexed by subject and by people. So if you worked at the White House, you're the cook or whatever. So they say, Sean was like to work at the cook. Did the president ever come and steal food in the middle of the night? And they ask you all these bizarre questions about what was it like to be the chef at the White House. And they call them oral histories. And there's thousands of these things from all different people who worked in the White House. So I looked up the threat thing that Eisenhower said, beware the military industrial complex. And there's 6 people who commented. So they asked Eisenhower's brother, Milton Eisenhower, was the president of Penn State University, what do you think of the speech? What do you think he meant by that? And they all basically said the same thing, is that there was actually a word taken out. People, unless you were out there and saw the speech, the drafts of the speech, you didn't realize it took a word. It wasn't beware of the military-industrial complex. It was beware of the military-industrial congressional complex. And that means that once you get Congress, who's got the money, into the loop, everybody's got jobs in their district, and you can do whatever you want. You're never going to shut this thing down. It just goes around. Everybody's making money. Everybody's got their hand in the pot, and you're not going to do it. So there's the idea, and that's what they're doing. They're getting Congress into this thing because Congress has got the money, and everybody's going to get rich from this thing. I say they're not going to discover anything. They're just going to have more sightings. They're going to have people writing in and stuff like that. They're going to play the little shell game, because I don't think they really have as many answers people think they have. Yeah, they have bodies, they have crafts, they have hardware. Even the hardware, like, and, it's the whole idea. You got this piece, it's 84 levels, and it's atomically structured. And it's like, oh, we're going to build a flying saucer from this. And the aliens are going, oh, like, come on. They're really hooked on that one. Or the Gary Nolan piece, where you got the Uba Tuba piece, where he's got the two pieces from the same crash, and the one the isotopes are messed with, and the other one's the isotopes are normal. And you can just see the aliens like, what's this? Let's give them this one. And everybody's like, oh, what's going on here? Let's get some money. Let's get some funding. And everybody's curious, and that's how they move the ball down the field.
Anything to leave the audience with? Like, where's this going next?
I think consciousness rises. It's the old idea. Everything advances one funeral at a time. I think we're fairly close. Like, you take a look at when I started the UFO thing, it was toxic. I mean, I didn't really care, but for most people, it was toxic to talk about UFOs. I worked at the University of Manitoba. I could talk about University of Manitoba as long as I didn't associate the University of Manitoba's name with it, stuff like that. And now it's okay to talk about UFOs. And all the rest of the subjects are going to come along, like near-death experiences. People may disagree. And what you see is these new ideas, orbs, apports, and stuff like that, that'll come in, that raise the consciousness. And we eventually are going to figure it out. We have multiple lives to do it. It's not a race. It's not give me everything yesterday. We are always in the deal. We've got to solve this thing. You're never going to solve it. It's always going to get more complex, but we're going to learn more. We're going to discover more. And mostly we're going to learn how reality actually works. Reality is a lot less physical than people think it is. And I guess Deepak Chopra sums it up. Everything is an activity inside consciousness. If you understand that, you understand this idea that it may be the simulated universe, that it's all us creating it, and we are the gods, we are the creators, and it's this loop, and it's getting more complex, and the universe is getting bigger, and we're having all these experiences. And that's where it's going. Right now, everybody's just tied into the stories because people want stories. They want something to put on YouTube or on Facebook or on Twitter, and it gets its 15 seconds. You know what it's like. You're on Twitter. I mean, you put something up, and within an hour, all your hits come, and then it goes, and by the next couple hours, everybody's on to something new. And because we have this very short attention span, and people are sort of consumed with, and they, maybe it's right. They're consumed with what they're doing because they have to. But eventually, we're going to learn that it's not the world that we thought it was, and that every time we make an assumption based upon what we see, it's always going to turn out to be wrong. Another 100 years, even the one now, the latest one was the one with the size of the universe. It was the most proved thing ever. It was the Big Bang, and the universe is 13.7 billion years. And now it's like, oh, sorry, we got this new telescope, and these big, huge galaxies are there at the beginning of the universe. So now we're estimating 28. And it's like, they always talk about channelers. Oh, these channelers, they didn't get it right. Look, they missed this or whatever. And it's like, how much can you miss it? You're out by 50%. I mean, that's science. It's supposed to be exact. Or the one with the galaxies, and it was 100 billion galaxies. And then suddenly in 2016, it went to 2 trillion. Like, you're out by 20 times. Like, come on. And they say, I said 100 billion galaxies? I never said that. Do you marry me, Sean? And it's like, that's how science works. It just sort of puts the band-aids. Wilbur Smith used to describe that, the guy around the Canadian government program. He said the way science is working with UFOs is the people look at it and a crack forms, and you put a band-aid on it, and then another crack forms, you put another band-aid on it. And that's what we're doing. We're just sort of covering up our stupidity or our arrogance, that we understand how this sort of stuff works, and we eventually move on. And if you look at what we believed 200 years ago, I mean, it's like a total joke, but everybody believed it then because that was their perceived reality. And now we got the same ego thing where we got it all figured out. Don't tell me, I know how this thing works. And eventually most of it's going to be wrong. And we're being led by, I'm not sure if it's ET. I think I always call it the intelligence. I think it's all the same thing. It may even be us. I mean, maybe us giving ourselves lessons, because you hear constantly people talking about the fact that that's my family. this is not my family. The ones that abducted me, I'm related to them. They're my family. And it's this idea, we may be part. It is, John Wheeler says, participatory universe. We may be the ones that are behind this whole thing. And it's a big, big game. And we're teaching ourselves and we're going through lessons, because if we came in, if reincarnation is a fact, we have lessons, then a lot of this stuff is not coincidence. Like 37% of all people who've had UFO experiences have had near-death experiences. And most of them have had two. And so the thing is, if you consider these to be random events, what's the chance that you were abducted and at the same time you had a near-death experience at 37% rate? That's not coincidence. You start looking at these things like, holy shoot, even like the film, the first film I got when I interviewed the guy who was filming it. He had never shot a film before in his life because the TV crew, they'd gone out and they were paying overtime. And the news producer said, that's bullshit. No more. Nobody's doing our flying sausage. You guys want flying sausage? You can go on your own time. So they had a volunteer crew of reporters and this guy who was a film editor who was running the big 1970 cameras. And they got the camera out there and he's running it. And he said the night before they'd almost got it, but they didn't get anything. He said, this thing is going, you see it glowing up and going back down, glowing. It was on the ground, glowing back up. He said, the next time this thing glows up, I'm going to shoot. It was almost like the UFO said, you ready? Get ready. And he pushed the trigger and the thing jumped into the air. And he got this famous film from ground to 3,000 feet in the air in 1/8 of a second. And he caught this thing on film. And that's the whole deal, is that it may not be as random as we think it is. That this is all sort of, we're making these plans and we're working all this sort of stuff and learning at the same time and making the universe a more complex place. It's a closed loop where we're feeding it in and it's getting more complex, almost like the universe, if it's has no duality to it, God doesn't know who he is. So it's this idea that there's all these different things happening. And if your little show ain't good enough, God takes his popcorn and he goes in the next movie theater. So every movie is legitimate and we make it very exciting. And that's what the phenomenon is doing. It's making it really exciting. It's like when I have my PowerPoint, when I'm going in Laughlin and my PowerPoint, it's all double slides and triple slides and the audios have been moved to different slides and the slides are expanded and squished. And I'm going, there's no way, you cannot do this. And it was like this idea. It's like, let's make it really, really weird. And you're in the theater and you're trying to figure this thing out. And that's what it is. It's like this play thing. All the world's a stage. All the men and women and aliens are but puppets. We have our entrances and exits and each man plays many roles. And when it's all over, you realize, holy shit, that was just a dream. I was a puppet. I was just playing a puppet. And then in your next lifetime, it'll be a forgotten dream. So enjoy the puppet while you're the puppet, because in the next lifetime, you're not even going to remember this ever happened.
I think that's the best way to end it, my friend.
There you go.
Thank you as always.
Too bad you didn't get that first part. We could have had a double header here.
Yeah, I think we still have enough for a double header regardless. So
there you go.
I appreciate it, my friend. Thank you.
We'll do it again. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Talk to you soon.
If you enjoyed this video, please click on like, subscribe, and the notification button so that you're alerted anytime I post something new.